Next, we will go into more details about social psychology. Social psychology is a type of psychology that has great emphasis on interpersonal relationships. And so this course, Psychology of Interpersonal Relationships, will mainly discuss topics from social psychology. Here is one definition of social psychology. So in addition to the previous definition of psychology, that it's the scientific study of behavior and mental processes, social psychology is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes in social situations. More precisely, it is the study of how people think about one another, influence one another, and relate to one another. In the human society that we all live in, we are not alone, right? But there are people around us that we interact with. Also, we are members of groups of various sizes, from households to groups you form with your peers and friends, to society and nations. So we live our lives not alone, but as social beings. And in such situations, we try to imagine and understand what other people are thinking. We try to predict others' actions. And we make decisions and take actions based on the situation we are in and act toward or against other people in various fashions, manners. So the presence of other people, or even just imagining other people in our heads, greatly influence our own actions. Conducting research and exploring the psychological mechanisms, the mental processes that govern our judgments and actions in social situations is the goal of social psychology. And this diagram displays some major essences that represent social psychology. Social psychology could be described as studies on social thinking, social influence, and social relations. So one, social psychology is the study of social thinking. That's how we think and understand other people, how we perceive ourselves and others, and what is the attitudes that we form toward other people, and how do we form those attitudes. And social psychology is also the study of social influence processes, including such topics like the effect of culture or pressures to conform, or how we are persuaded or how we persuade other people, and also how people behave as groups of people. And third, social psychology studies about social relations. So we ask questions like how do we act toward others in a positive or a negative way? In certain situations, we may act negatively toward other people, like showing prejudice or aggression, and we may end up hurting the person or mistreating the person. And on the other hand, we may have a positive relationship with others and perhaps show attraction and intimacy, or help other people who is in need, right? And we obviously help people we know, like friends and family members, but we also sometimes offer help to complete strangers, somebody we don't know. So what are the conditions that determine whether we have those kind of positive interactions with each other, or why in some cases we have negative interactions, like hurting somebody? And these are some broad list of topics covered in social psychology. So if you look into any social psychology textbook, you will most likely find each of these topics in the table of contents. Now, of these three sets of topics, social thinking, influence, and relations, in this semester, in this Psychology of Interpersonal Relationships A course, we will focus on this first essence, which is social thinking. And to understand the idea of social thinking, it's good to remember one of the fundamental and central concepts in social psychology. And that is the fact that we construct our social reality. This means that we differ in how we understand reality. So to get you familiar with this concept, this idea, let's think about this example. So what do you see in this drawing? Do you see a duck or do you see a rabbit? And it depends. So for some of you, this was a duck. For some of you, it was a rabbit. And after hearing this explanation, now you can see it in two different ways, I believe. A duck or a rabbit. So what this means is that there is one objective reality, right? So it's the same line drawing for all of you. You are viewing this one single picture. But how you interpret the image may be different from person to person. So in other words, there is one objective reality, but different perceptions exist. This also is one such example. Is the person angry or fearful? Do you think this person is experiencing anger? Or is this person experiencing fear? And the reason you interpret the person's emotion may involve different factors. So maybe your understanding of the situation the person is in have caused you to perceive the person as either angry or fearful. You may have seen the person insulting someone, or you may have seen the person being insulted by somebody else. And that could lead to different perceptions of this emotion, of the facial expression. Or maybe your knowledge about the person's personality or how you understand the person's personality may have caused different perceptions. And also your own experience or your own personality may have influenced how you view this person's emotion. In one related study, children were shown this image and they gave judgments of the emotion. And this study found that physically abused children were more likely to perceive the face as angry compared to non-abused children. So the social environment and what kind of experience one gets may influence how they construct the social reality. So coming back to this concept that we construct social reality, people perceive events in different ways. We understand and interpret other people's behaviors, what happens to them, what happens to ourselves in different ways. And one important fact is that we humans have this irresistible urge to explain behavior, to attribute it to some cause, meaning that we want to find the cause of the event. We want to understand that something has caused the event, and therefore to make the event seem orderly, predictable, and controllable. And this all influences how we perceive the event. And this is why you and I may react differently to a situation, because we think differently about it. A 1951 Princeton-Dartmouth football match provides a very interesting demonstration of how we construct social reality. This was a football game between two college football teams, and the game became a very rough and dirty one from opening kickoff until the end. Several players had to leave the game because of injury, and one key player on the Princeton side, who's shown on this Time magazine, was forced out of the game with a broken nose and mild concussion. And not long after the game, two psychologists who were actually from each of the two universities Cantrell was a professor at Princeton and Hastoff was a professor at Dartmouth. So two psychologists from each university conducted this study. They showed films of the game to the students of each university and asked students to count and judge who was responsible for each infraction in the game. So these students watched the same exact film, but the result differed critically between the two campuses. So the Princeton students counted 9.8 penalties committed by the Dartmouth team. On the other hand, Dartmouth students counted 4.3 penalties committed by the team on their own side. To summarize, in this experiment, the Princeton students saw twice as many Dartmouth violations as the Dartmouth students saw, right? And the conclusion is that there is an objective reality out there, but we always view it through the lens of our beliefs and values. In other words, we tend to see things in a way that we want to see it. And this is one reason why psychology studies social thinking. So through scientific research, psychology tries to investigate how people understand the reality. What are the variables and conditions that determine those different perceptions of social reality? And also how those different social realities influence people's behaviors and actions. And here are several other core concepts behind social psychology. For example, social influences greatly shape our behavior. So our actions are influenced by social relationships that we have with people around us, and also on the situations we are in at that moment. Also, personal attitudes shape our behavior. So what kind of attitudes we have toward various things, objects, or ideas, they all influence our action. So for instance, our political attitudes would influence voting behaviors. And also the attitudes that we have toward the poor people would influence in our willingness to actually help the poor. And finally, personality dispositions also shape our behavior. So facing the same situation, different people may react differently depending on what kind of personality they have. And throughout this course, this semester, we will discuss over some of these elements, like social thinking, social influence, attitudes, how these elements associate and affect person perception, that is how we understand about other people, and also interpersonal behaviors, how we react and respond and take action against other people, and how we interact with other people. Okay, finally, this is the response number for this lecture video.